If you were to ask someone what the latest Xbox is called, you'd probably get a mix of answers. The Xbox X, the Xbox One X, maybe even the Xbox Series X, which is the actual correct answer. But if you were to ask the same question about the latest PlayStation, almost anyone can tell you that it's the PS5. Simple, right? It raises one big question though. Why is Xbox's naming so confusing, while PlayStation just goes by numbers? Xbox's naming started strong with the original Xbox. It was simple and straightforward, and it made sense as Microsoft's answer to the Sony's PlayStation. But over time, the name took a confusing turn, with labels that left many wondering which console was the latest, and which version was superior. So let's look into how this once promising brand became confusing enough to cause people to either stick with their old console, or even switch over to PlayStation. But let's rewind to the days of the first Xbox, and see where it all went wrong. Microsoft's first console launched in 2001, called simply the Xbox. It was the latest and greatest console, and it was a real competitor to Sony's hold on the gaming world. Xbox was a fresh, unique name. Being the first model, there was no confusion about it. It was just Xbox. But when the next generation came around, Microsoft chose the name Xbox 360, which would set a standard for the next generations. Instead of calling it the Xbox 2, which would have been a clear progression, they went with the Xbox 360 naming scheme. At the time, the Xbox 360 name was cool. It was unique and definitely felt like an upgrade. It was the first hint that Xbox wouldn't be following a standard numbering system like PlayStation. By breaking from a simple, predictable naming scheme early on, Xbox began paving a road for confusion, and it would only get more complicated with each new release. But with two models on the market, it still wasn't too hard to follow. The 360 was obviously the newer, better console, but things wouldn't stay that straightforward for long. Around came 2013, and Microsoft released the Xbox One. Right from the start, the name didn't make a lot of sense. If you've just gone from the Xbox 360, why would the next model be the One? Did it mean it was better, or was it going back to being the first Xbox? People were left guessing, and to make things even more confusing, Microsoft started adding letters with the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X. At a first glance, it wasn't clear which model was better. Was the Xbox One S just a smaller version, or was it superior? Or what about the Xbox One X? For many people, it just wasn't clear if the X or S was significantly better than the other. But Microsoft had a chance to fix the confusion. It was with the release of their next generation consoles in 2020. But they ended up doubling down on this chaos with the Xbox Series X and the Xbox Series S. These names are so similar to the Xbox One X and One S that for anyone who's not in the gaming space, it's hard to tell if these are even new consoles or just special editions of the older ones. Even worse, the names still don't immediately tell you that the Series X is superior to the Series S. To some, Series X could sound just like another variation of the One X, and with both models launching at the same time, the whole generation just kind of blurred together. It left people wondering which version to buy, which model was a true upgrade, and if upgrading was even worth it at all. But something that is worth it is hitting the subscribe button. We just recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and now my new goal is to hit 10,000 by the end of the year, so it would be really appreciated if you could help out in reaching that goal. But getting back on topic, the confusing naming scheme may even be hurting Xbox's success in the gaming market. People are probably looking at the Series X or S and just assuming that it's a spin on the previous generation's Xbox One X or S, rather than a true next-gen experience. This has resulted in many people just choosing to stick with their old consoles, or even switching to PlayStation, which makes it obvious that the PlayStation 5 is a big step up from the PlayStation 4. But let's dive deeper into the Xbox's history of weaker sales. When we look at the sales for the latest consoles, the numbers tell a really compelling story. The PlayStation 5 has been selling off the shelves, while Xbox's latest products, the Series X and S, haven't been seeing that same level of success. And as of now, the PS5 has sold 60 million units, making it one of the fastest selling consoles in history. In contrast, Xbox Series X and S have struggled to keep pace, with estimates hovering around 30 million. So what gives? Could it really be that the Xbox's confusing naming scheme is playing that big of a role in this difference? To get a better understanding, let's take a quick look at the previous generation. The Xbox One launched in 2013, and while it had a solid start, it faced stiff competition from the PS4. At the end of their life cycles, the PS4 had sold over 116 million units compared to the Xbox One's 58 million. This large gap raises an eyebrow, especially considering that both consoles had comparable capabilities and specs. So why did PlayStation come out on top? A lot of it comes down to the clear and straightforward branding that PlayStation adopted. With names like PS4 and PS5, customers knew exactly what they were getting. But when it came to Xbox, as mentioned before, potential buyers were just left confused. And then when comparing the sales between the 360 and the PS3, the correlation's even stronger. With the 360 being a clear second generation device to the original Xbox, it actually stood as a strong competitor to the PS3, and actually resulted in the Xbox 360 selling a similar amount when comparing it to the PS3. So it seems like the naming confusion might actually have a deeper impact on the perception of these consoles. For many people, a name is more than just a label, it reflects the product's identity and quality. Imagine walking into a store and you see an Xbox Series X and an Xbox One X sitting side by side. If you're just a casual gamer, how are you supposed to know which one's the latest and greatest? Without that clear distinction, many consumers might just assume that these are variations of the same product rather than a completely new next-gen console. Comparing this to the PlayStation, as mentioned before, they've been sticking with the simple numbers. The PlayStation, the PS2, the PS3, the PS4, and now the PS5. It's a naming system that's as straightforward as it gets. If you see a PS5, it's obvious that it's the 5th generation and the newest one. PlayStation also is mastered at keeping things simple with even their high-end models. Take the PS4 Pro. Just one extra word tells you that it's an upgrade. No need to guess if it's actually better than the PS4. In fact, PlayStation's clarity might actually be one of the biggest reasons why they've kept their lead in sales over Xbox. While Xbox fans are wondering if the Series X is actually better than the One X, PlayStation players know exactly where they stand. And when they launched the PS5, PlayStation waited before releasing the Pro model, giving the base PS5 time to make its mark. By the time the Pro comes out, there's no chance of confusing it with the base model. Everyone knows that the PS5 Pro is just a beefed up PS5. It's almost like they've built a roadmap for Xbox to follow, but so far, Xbox just hasn't taken any hints. But the Xbox isn't the only console to make the same naming mistakes. Nintendo actually had a similar issue with the Wii U. The original Wii was a massive success, and when Nintendo released the Wii U, they probably assumed that it would just be the next big thing. But the U just wasn't enough to convey that this was a totally new console. Many people just thought that the Wii U was a small add-on or an upgrade to the Wii, and not an entirely new system. The Wii U sales were disappointing, and part of that might actually be traced back to the name. If Nintendo had called it something like the Wii 2, it might have been clearer that it was an entirely new console. Now, with rumors circulating that Nintendo's next console might be called the Switch 2, they seem like they've learned their lesson. And maybe it's a lesson that Xbox can learn from too. They're definitely in a tough spot with the naming because of the precedent they've set. They could keep the series label and call the next one something like the Xbox Series Z, or go with something like the Xbox Elite or Xbox Infinite. But let's be real, these are just more confusing names that don't help anyone know what's new or which model to buy. Personally, I think it's time for Xbox to reset and just go with a simple numbering system. Start fresh with the Xbox 5 and go from there. They could go with the Xbox 6, 7, and so on. If they want a high-end model, just add a Pro or Plus to the name, like Apple did with the iPhone. A clean, simple name would make it clear which console is the newest one, and avoid the confusion that has plagued Xbox's naming scheme for years. But at the end of the day, a straightforward naming system can make it easier for everyone, from casual gamers to hardcore Xbox fans, to keep up with the latest consoles. So what do you think Xbox should call their next console? And has their naming scheme been as confusing for you as it's been for the rest of us?